Hello everyone. In the last lesson we found the Israelites and the Dogmaites, 11 tribes of Dogmaites and the one tribe of Israelites in Egypt. They were enslaved by Dogmaite religion, politics, and the social system. So Egypt is a metaphor for enslavement to the way of the mind. The Pharaoh is a symbol of clergy, politicians, parents, all of us when we try to enslave other people to our ideas and do not empower other people to be themselves and define their own ideas and behavior with the power of spirit. According to the allegory, maybe you call them Israelites, were in Egypt, but they weren't all Israelites. They were in Egypt 200 years. By the end of the 200 years, you can imagine that most of them were Dogmaites, and there were a few Israelites. One of them was a man by the name of Moses, who listened to the Spirit and was told by Spirit, like Joan of Arc, to lead the people out of Egypt to the promised earth. At first, Moses was hesitant to go to the Pharaoh and ask the people enslaved to leave. But he finally did it, and the Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites leave. Almost immediately, Egypt experienced a plague. Moses returned after the plague, asked again. He was told no, and Egypt experienced another plague. Those plagues were famine, they were disease, they were various forms of them. Finally, the Pharaoh gave permission for Moses to take the people and to leave. Now, to understand what was going on, let me make a parallel. Suppose today a group of Catholics went to the Pope and said, "We've been listening to Spirit, and we think it's time for the Church to stop controlling people's thoughts and actions, to stop making them into Dogmaites. We think it's time for you to give everyone permission to discover their own answers on their own with the help of Spirit. We think that the clergy should, instead of indoctrinating people, should spend their time empowering people to listen to Spirit. If they choose to listen to follow Christian Catholic dogma, that's their choice and Catholic rules. But we think it's time to free people to be themselves." Now, you can imagine the Pope, the situation he'd have. If he ever issued such an edict, that would probably be the end of the Catholic Church. Conservatives would go wild. And there would be tremendous division. Right now, the Catholic Church is suffering plagues because they won't let people be free. There's division within the Catholic Church. There's sexual abuse going on. There's financial abuse going on. So it's I think, a very apt parallel to the situation that we have in this Egyptian part of the Abraham allegory. Finally, Moses is given permission to lead people out of Egypt. When an organization a dogmatic organization exists, it will have conflict. It will have internal conflict, and it will conflict with all the other organizations that have different dogma. So establishing a dogmatite religion or political party or nation will inevitably bring on plagues. Those plagues result from the internal and external conflicts. Now back to the allegory. Pharaoh finally releases Moses and his people to go to the promised earth. They march out of Egypt and they encounter the Red Sea. Now remember from our last lesson that a sea is a metaphor for emotions. Whenever we leave one level of truth and love to go to another level, we have to overcome our emotions that hold us to the present level of living. That's symbolic of what it means for Moses to go to the Red Sea. He's got to lead his people out of the security that they know as dogmaites to walking in a wilderness area, which is symbolic of having little external control by dogmaite leaders. When he gets to the sea, in order to get to cross it, he divides the sea. Now, to divide the sea is a metaphor. He didn't physically divide the sea. It's a metaphor for overcoming your emotions and walking on dry earth, which is a way of saying that you walk on the firmness of your principles to the freedom. We see that in the following poem by Buddha, where he talks about the necessity of crossing a river, which is his metaphor for the sea. Buddha expressed the importance of being able to conquer your emotions in order to get to freedom. Let me read you a poem that parallels dividing the sea. Buddha said, 36 streams attack you in pleasurable lust. O slave of desire, float upon the streams. Seeker, empty the boat, lighten the load of desires and passions. Go beyond this way of the mind to the other shore, where the world dissolves and everything becomes clear. Let's take that slowly. 36 streams attack you in pleasurable lust. When we're on the way of the mind, we are lusting for things, and we're experiencing a roller coaster of emotions, from anxiety to excitement. O slave of desire, float upon the streams. In other words, conquer your emotions. Seeker, empty the boat. We empty the boat when we empty the boat of our ego attachment to the things and people that control us. Go beyond this way of the mind to the other shore, where the world dissolves and everything becomes clear. The world he's talking about is the world of living on the way of the mind. It dissolves once you conquer your emotions, and then everything becomes clear. When you move from one level of truth and love to the higher level, there's tremendous clarity that occurs. But you've got to conquer your emotions to do that. So symbolically, Buddha is saying the same thing in his way as the Abraham allegory is saying. Dividing the sea is the same thing as emptying the boat and floating upon the stream. Both of them are saying we need to conquer the emotions that hold us to this level of life in order to arise to a higher one. We see the same kind of metaphor used in the Gospel of Mark in the New Testament. I want to read 3 short passages from the Gospel of Mark that shows Jesus conquering his emotions symbolically by either sitting on the sea or calming the sea or walking on the sea. They're all the same metaphor as dividing the sea, emptying the boat, floating on the stream. It's all the same ancient metaphor for conquering yourself in order to evolve to a new level of life. In one passage we read, "And he began to teach beside the sea." In other words, he began to teach beside people who were full of emotion. And a very large crowd gathered about him. So they got into a boat and sat in it on the sea. Okay, notice he's using the word boat, which he probably got from the Buddhist poem. And he's sitting on the sea. In other words, he's conquering his emotions. He's doing exactly what Buddha expressed in his poem. The next passage finds Jesus in a boat in the middle of a storm. The waves are lashing the boat. The disciples are scared. The wind is blowing, and he's asleep. And in the passage we read, "And he awoke, and he rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, 'Peace, be still.' And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And they, the disciples, were filled with awe, and said to one another, 'Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?'" So Jesus calms the wind, which are the ideas in our mind, and he calms the sea, which is our emotions. And he does that by being on the way of the soul. He becomes, in the beginning, he becomes one with Spirit, and with Spirit, he is able to conquer himself and get, in Buddhist terms, to the other side where there's freedom and a new level of life. Let me read one last passage. "And the boat with the disciples was out on the sea, and Jesus was alone on the earth. And he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. So he came to them walking on the sea." Walking on the sea is the same, as metaphorically, saying the same thing as dividing the sea, emptying the boat, sitting on the sea. Walking on the sea means he is able to conquer his emotions, to be one with Spirit, in order to be movement from stillness, in order to be wise love in the world. So what we've just looked at is a series of passages from Genesis, from Buddha, and from Jesus, in which the same metaphor is used. That in order to move, that tells us that in order to grow, we must conquer ourselves and conquer our emotions. This is the end of the lesson. I hope that you found it helpful. If you did, would you click on like below? You can leave comments and questions below. And I look forward to talking to you at the next lesson. Thank you.